We are Campaign Force. This is the Veterans in Politics podcast. Let's introduce you to our guest.
In this episode, we speak to veteran in politics Doug Beattie, MC MLA. Doug is a decorated veteran, having been awarded the Military Cross in Afghanistan. This was just one of Doug's 13 operational tours in a military career that can only be described as epic. He is now a member of the Northern Ireland Assembly representing his hometown. And despite all of these achievements, you will hear him humbly describe his life as a bit of an accident. He talks about his entry into local politics as a councillor, how he lives by our stand up, serve again mantra, and the advantages of using his military and personal brand in political life. This is one episode you do not want to miss. Prepare to be inspired. It's time for you to listen to the conversation.
First of all, I mean, this is absolutely fantastic, to come on here. I mean, this technology, this virtual world we're all living in now is very different from what we're used to, but it's something that we just need to adapt ourselves to. I'm not used to this, but it's wonderful to get involved. Many of those who are in the chat may well know that I've been a career soldier for a long time, having joined the army in 1982 as a young ranger, as a private soldier, and progressed through the ranks to become the regimental sergeant major of my battalion, which was the first battalion, the Royal Irish Regiment. My commanding officer was Colonel Tim Collins, and I stood beside Colonel Tim when he gave his now famous Eve of Battle speech. Which is great, but it was just a moment in time, and I've had many moments in time, including the guarding of Rudolf Hess, including the guarding of the cruise missiles at Greenham Common and Bosnia and Kosovo and various other places like that. But I guess the invasion of Iraq and being the regimental sergeant major when you take your battalion to war, the first time my battalion has gone to war since Korea, I think is a real milestone, and I was very gifted to have done that. Having completed that and completed my tour of the RSM, I found myself getting bounced around the world a little bit. I went to be the RSM of S4 in Sarajevo for a period of time, and I then went to, I can't remember who it was, at the division it was, but I was in Craigie Hall in Edinburgh as the RSM there for a little period of time as well, before I commissioned to become an army officer, a late entry army officer in 2005. And from that period on, I guess my time as a commissioned officer was all regulated between training at ITC Catterick to moving on to doing 3 tours of Afghanistan. So I did 3 tours of Afghanistan, which started in 2006, and my last one finished in 2011, and I was pretty burnt out by that stage. And I was intent on leaving the military, but very luckily for me, I was employed as a permanent staff administration officer for a reserve battalion, and I took that up. And here's where it got quite interesting for me, because my life has been about accidents in many ways. So I was a PSAO for 2 Royal Irish based in Northern Ireland. I was in Belfast. But the workload was not what I was used to. The speed of life wasn't what I was used to. But I still wanted to serve more, and I wanted to do more for my community. But I got fatter. My hair got grayer. I got glasses. I'm a little bit slower than I.
Where's the beard, Doug? You had a lovely beard.
And the beard comes and goes as I want. But I really had that sense of wanting to continue to serve, but not being able to serve in the same way, because physically I'd got older and things had moved on. And I'd find I'd had extra time. So I joined a political party. And then within 2 weeks, that political party asked me to stand in the local council elections, and I did, and was elected as a local councillor for my local council, which is called Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council. It's pretty catchy, that, isn't it? And I did that for a couple of years. And then again, they asked, look, would you stand to be an MLA in the Assembly? I never thought much about it, and I said yes. And I was elected first time. That was 2016. And I've been an MLA since. So that's 4 years as MLA and 2 years as a councillor. So that's the sum of my time as in politics. But I've got to say, purely by accident. I've gone from being a young ranger with no educational qualifications, and I still have none, through to being an RSM, to being commissioned, to being elected to the local assembly here in Northern Ireland. And that's pretty much my life in a nutshell. And a little bit of other things thrown in between. I managed to write 3 books, received the Military Cross and the Queen's Commendation for Bravery and the NATO Meritorious Service Medal, and some award for Northern Ireland as well. So all of them are little snippets thrown into a life which has been quite full.
Hi, Johnny here. Sorry to interrupt the conversation. What an epic start. Before we crack on, if you just hit subscribe, that'll ensure you don't miss out on any future conversation. We've got more of these stories coming, and in the meantime, let you crack on and listen to the rest of Doug's story.
It's a phenomenal life and an absolute phenomenal career. And for those of you that haven't grabbed hold of a copy of Doug's book, I'd highly recommend it. And you more casually explain your life there, and you just sort of sit back here listening, going, absolutely wow. But I think for me, what really strikes me in that is that, you know, in terms of you serving again in politics, people actually asking you to serve again was probably the critical thing. You say it's by accident, but actually being asked to serve again, it really strikes me as a fundamental question that we don't ask our armed forces community. And that's certainly something that we endeavour to do with Campaign Force. But I mean, you did get asked to serve again, but why did you say yes? What really drove you into politics?
Well, I mean, it's really interesting of Campaign Force, because they use that term, serve again. And I guess if it's within you as a person that you want to serve, then it's in, and it never really leaves you. You get older, you get frailer. We all know this, but that sense of duty, that sense of service, never really leaves you. And when I was asked to serve again, this time as in the political arena, I really did stop and think about it, and I thought, well, what can I offer? What can I offer? What can I take with me that I've learned over many years in the military, and is it transferable into politics? And I suddenly realised that it absolutely is. That the left and right of arc that I have as a person from my time in the military actually aids the ability to get into politics and to be able to put a point across. So that fundamental question of, you know, if I got into politics, could I add value to what I was trying to achieve? And I really analysed that, and I thought that I could, and indeed other people thought similar, and therefore I stepped into the political arena with a view to bringing my brand of politics, my brand of engagement, my brand of openness and honesty and transparency and professionalism, and that's what really drew me into that political sphere. That I thought I could really, honestly, genuinely engage and make a difference in politics.
And I think we'll unpick some of those things that drive you in terms of those military values and skills later on in the chat. But I mean, you had a distinguished military career, from a boy soldier, RSM, LE commissioning, and I think I looked up sort of 13 plus operational tours. Pretty phenomenal, particularly for you and your family, to spend all that time away on operations. But after a career that was so long, that spanned decades, what was more challenging, transitioning out of the military or transitioning into politics?
Well, I've got to say there's an interesting point here, I suppose, and I guess if we take politics aside, I think transitioning out of the military is quite difficult for anybody, whether it's into politics or into something else. But here's what I found really, really difficult, and people know this from politics. Within the military, you're part of a large team. You're part of a team who works for each other, and we generally do. And if something needs doing, we do it because everything's mission-centric, and we make sure that the task is done. And one of the big things I found in politics, although you're part of a political grouping, in my part, the Ulster Unionist Party, although you're part of a political grouping, you're actually, in some ways, a group of individuals. Because come election time, you have to fight your own seat. So your success is about you and what you do. So within politics, there's a sense, which I was never used to, that you do have to operate as an individual. And yes, as an individual within a collective, a political party, but you really have to learn how to operate as an individual. I found it really, really difficult, because I suddenly found myself doing things for other people And whenever I was asking for something similar to come back, it just didn't happen. So that transferable piece from the military to politics for me was quite difficult, and it made politics a hard arena to get in. But there's a dichotomy here: is when you get into it, then you can start bringing that brand from the military and then transcribing it into that arena and saying, well, this is how we need to do things. This is how we analyze things. This is how we work together. And if you work as a unit, then you have a better outcome. So although you may have to work as an individual, it's the collective output that will either help you get elected or not elected, or get your points across when you're in an assembly, or you're in a group making decisions in a committee or something like that. But I find that transition into politics difficult, but only because it's a different way of operating. And actually, my service in the military was something that really helped me generate the way I did business while I'm in politics.
I think what you just described there is we can all resonate with, whether or not we've transitioned into civilian environments, and the piece of us that we bring from the armed forces into those organisations, and also how you've turned a perceived negative into a positive. But would you say that's been your biggest challenge in politics so far, that kind of cultural understanding?
No, and I'm going to be a little bit local. I'm in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland remains a very divided society, no matter which way you look at it. Within politics in Northern Ireland, it's not about voting to get somebody in; it's about voting to keep somebody out, and that's a hard task to get involved. So I guess my biggest issue, was always about divided politics here in Northern Ireland. And it really is divided politics, and that sense of every word that you do is viewed one side of a community differently than it is by another side of a community. And we paramilitary groups, terrorist groups knocking about here in Northern Ireland, and therefore, and just today, or last night, I received death threats from loyalist paramilitary groups. As an Ulster Unionist, it's always difficult when you get it from loyalist paramilitary groups. But that's what's difficult here, because people view you based on history in many ways. So many people in the nationalist or the Republican communities will view me, because I was a one-time soldier, as somebody not to be trusted. It doesn't matter what I do, it doesn't matter what I say, not to be trusted. And they unpick every single word that I say. So if I say something which is pretty straightforward, they will unpick every word, and they will find their own meaning within that. So that's difficult. So one of my biggest problems is trying to bring myself to politics here in Northern Ireland. And that's the hardest thing about politics here in Northern Ireland, not politics in general.
I mean, that's a pretty harrowing difference between perhaps politics on the mainland over here and Westminster and politics within Northern Ireland. And for some of us, that was quite difficult to hear, particularly those that are aspiring to serve their communities or go on into Westminster. But to hear that from you, it's quite stark. And that's just, I guess, one of a huge difference. But people in mainland Britain and in England in particular will have little understanding of devolved government, full stop. So what would you say are the key differences from where you see it between Westminster and devolved government?
Well, we have a very specifics within the devolved government and the devolved settlement. That is, that there are certain aspects of the decision-making process here in Northern Ireland which we will always make, and we will decide, and that's part of the devolution settlement. So anything to do with health, and COVID-19 is a prime example, that's to the devolved government to decide what direction we take in regards to health. Exactly the same with education, and exactly the same with housing and many other. So a lot of the things that you take for granted that come from Westminster, when you come to the devolved settlement, or you come to the Assembly in Northern Ireland, they're actually decisions made by us. And I'll give you an example of that, if I can, please. Boris Johnson yesterday laid out the plan for COVID-19. He changed the language that he's going to use, the stay alert language. But because health is devolved to Northern Ireland. We haven't followed that path. We are slightly different. So we have decided that actually we're different here in Northern Ireland. The demographics is different here in Northern Ireland. We need to look at it differently, and we have the ability to do so. So we've stuck with the old message. So we're not changing, and we have the right to do that. And we can do similar with other issues such as education and such as housing. So there's a difference, that we have the ability to retain what's important to the people here in Northern Ireland, because we're a very different society in Northern Ireland than you are in London or in Manchester or in Birmingham. We have the ability to retain some things that we think are better for our people. Now, that all sounds great, and trying to government to the lowest person possible is what you're trying to do. You know, the more you can get government out of the top houses, you know, be that Westminster, be that the Northern Ireland Assembly or the Scottish Assembly, you know, the more we can get that down to local government, and the more local government can get it down to the people, that's the best way to have governance. And that's what devolved governments get you. But it's not all positive. There's an awful lot of negatives there. We have huge negatives here in regards to saying, all right, got huge negative in regards to abortion controls, you know, what to deal with, and other things. Our judicial system is really difficult here. Because policing and justice has been devolved as well, so that's our responsibility. So our sentencing criteria is incredibly different here in Northern Ireland than it is in the rest of the United Kingdom, and that's something that we have to try and look at and make better. So there are many things here in Northern Ireland which we absolutely decide on how our path is going to be and what we're going to do. But some of that's not all positive. But there are also things that come from Westminster that we have no say over whatsoever. The armed forces is not devolved. We have no say of what happens in regards to the armed forces. But we do have a say in veterans, because veterans need healthcare, and healthcare is a devolved. So it does get a little bit complicated.
I was going to say, I think in the early stages, I know you've been very outspoken on veterans affairs, and the fact that Northern Ireland didn't have a seat at the table at the old Covenant reference group in number 10.
Yeah.
I guess as we've seen the transition to the Office of Veterans Affairs and veterans issues being more normalised, I guess, across government, across health, across education, and away from the sort of the ghettoisation of veterans affairs at the MOD, that gives devolved government a huge opportunity to have an impact on veterans affairs, and actually turning that perceived negative into one of those advantages of devolved government.
Absolutely, and we have just started the recruitment process for a Veterans Commissioner here in Northern Ireland, which will be appointed at the end of this month, I believe, or shortly after. And that's a positive, a real positive, because there's small things here in Northern Ireland that people just don't understand, and it's not their fault that they don't understand. I'll give you an example. When you leave the military and you transition to civilian life, you get enhanced learning credits in the form of a promissory note from the Ministry of Defence, but it has your name and your rank and your address and what unit you served on in this promissory note. Many people in Northern Ireland won't use those enhanced learning credits because they won't go to a training provider because they don't know who's in that, and people are still concerned about security here in Northern Ireland. So that could be easily fixed by that promissory note being delivered in a different manner. So the small things like that, people maybe don't realise what's happening here in Northern Ireland, and how the legacy of our troubles is still with us today. I mean, I still have to check my car 3 or 4 times a day because the threat is still very much here. Yesterday, ATO was out and cleared 2 IEDs no more than 3 miles from where I'm sitting now talking to you. So that hasn't changed. People don't hear about it, and that's a good thing in many ways because we don't want to raise its profile. Yeah. But that doesn't change the fact that it's happening.
No. Well, again, just it's great having you in on this conversation, just to remind some of us, either that are from your part of the world or have served there, that is the reality of everyday life, and particularly for those like you that are putting your head above the parapet and serving again in public life, and being so open about your military background. I guess with you, Doug, you can't really hide it. It really does hit home. And
it's interesting, Johnny, that you raised something there. Sorry to jump across you.
Go for it.
But there's one of the problems in Northern Ireland is we're trying to normalise society here in Northern Ireland. And sometimes the MOD fail at this because they don't allow soldiers to normalise themselves here in Northern Ireland. And if we allowed it to be normal, if we allowed being in the military something that's normal here in Northern Ireland, then that would help us. Now, of course, the MOD, and I'm not blaming the MOD, they have a duty of care for their soldiers because the threat here is still at severe. But we need to do something to try and normalise the fact is that we have military who are permanently based here in Ireland. I think it's something in the region of 4,000 permanently based here in Northern Ireland. And until we normalise them being here, then we are always going to be chasing this narrative.
And that normalisation is something we need to do here in the rest of Britain too, because we still have this narrative of mad, bad or sad versus everyone's a hero, whereas we know that the vast majority of people, 95% of veterans say thereabouts, are just everyday folk who go and resettle in communities, which is why it's so important that people stand up and serve again in their communities. With 20,000 councillors across the UK, no one having a clue how many have got a military background. So the more that we can get people within positions of leadership in communities, the more normal it will seem to be a veteran. But until that happens, then the media narrative and certain quarters of the veterans community, who shall remain nameless, will be very vocal on Twitter and in providing an image that all veterans are broken or that everyone's a hero. So normalisation is certainly something that we need to address here in the rest of Britain too.
It's interesting, Johnny, if I can. My party, the Aussie Unionist Party, we've 10 MLAs, and of those 10 MLAs, 4 are either serving or have served in the military. We've got our party leader is an ex-nuclear submarine commander. We have an MLA who lost both his legs in Afghanistan, Andy Allen. And we have other members who are in the Army Reserve now. So there's a huge tradition of service within the Ulster Unionist Party at that level. And if you go down to local council level, we have dozens who have served in the armed forces. So there's an awful lot of service here in Northern Ireland from the ex-military types.
Oh, wow. I know I'd certainly value some introductions to some of those people.
Yeah.
So with that history of service, and we're just kind of going to dive into a little bit about some of those skills. Sport for choice with all of that record of service. But what would you say are those skills or values or experiences from military service that you've lent into during difficult times in politics, would you say?
I think it's, I talked about it slightly earlier there, Johnny. It's the ability within the military where you deal with so many different people, not just within your unit, but with other units, but with civilian organizations. And then you serve overseas and you deal with other people from other military forces and other agencies. It's that understanding of how other people operate, I think, is what gave me an extremely wide left and right of arc. And that left and right of arc has been really important in building relationships up in Northern Ireland, right across communities. And I know it's difficult, and I said that earlier, it's difficult. But the fact is that I can understand people from different backgrounds. I think that has helped me an awful lot. We have a huge issue here with the armed forces in Northern Ireland. So clearly my service in the armed forces leads me into a position where I can help members of the armed forces, and I kind of have an issue in regards to veterans on a day-to-day basis. So I have to deal with that. But I guess it's that respect piece, that you get, and it's bred into you within the military, to respect people, to respect opinions, that integrity piece, that professionalism piece. I think all of those really build into those that can add something to politics. Of course, there's an awful lot of reading and digesting documents and understanding things. And I said to you earlier on that I've got no educational qualifications, and I still have got no educational qualifications. So I left school at 16 with nothing, and I've still got nothing. So in some ways, it can be a little bit more difficult for me. So I have to read things maybe 2 or 3 times and digest it, and sometimes it can be difficult. I'm the justice spokesperson within the Ulster Unionist Party, so I deal with all things in regards to justice, and that includes legacy, which includes the legacy of the Troubles, which includes what's going on with our military veterans. So sometimes there's no way around it. It's just having that mentality and that regime and that discipline to sit down and read through these documents and understand these documents and dissect and analyze these documents and to be able to present them in a way that people can understand. So I think that discipline piece is incredibly important in politics, and I get that purely from the military.
Okay. And would there be a piece of advice that you would give to other military looking at getting involved in politics, from local government to devolved government to Westminster? What would that be?
I would say two things. First of all, they will absolutely have something to offer. They will definitely have something to offer. And I would say to any of them, get into politics. We have a proud history within the United Kingdom of soldiers of all ranks getting themselves involved in politics. So I would say to everybody, really think about it and really give it a go, because we need people like you in politics here in Northern Ireland. And I know that fits exactly with your message, but that I'm absolutely convinced of that. The second thing I would say to people who want to get into politics is make sure you get the right party to join. If you're going in as an independent, then fine, you live with that yourself and it becomes like more difficult. But if you're going to go into politics, really look at who you're going to be part of, which political party you're going to be part of, because it not only has to be able to represent your views, but you need to have a voice and a platform within it. Whenever I was getting into politics, whenever I was asked to get into politics, I looked at all of the different political parties, and I really delved into who would be able to give me a platform to be able to present what I think is right for the people of Northern Ireland, and who would give me that voice in the best way possible. And I looked at 6 different political parties. Some I could discount very, very quickly, and some I had to really think about. And I nearly joined the Northern Ireland Conservatives. Labour doesn't stand here in Northern Ireland, apart from the SDLP, Social Democratic and Labour Party, but they're a nationalist party, and it would be difficult for me to join something like that, because their aspiration is for a united Ireland. But to really look at the party and make your decisions, and not just to jump, because you could absolutely expend yourself in a party which has got no platform whatsoever. And I've seen people who have joined a political party which has no platform, and their skills were wasted. So really, really, really do your research and think about which party you're going to join if you're going to join a party.
Yeah, and that's pretty much consistent with our advice. We at Campaign Force do not advocate one party over another. We're politically agnostic. However, we've got a fantastic network across the political parties. And we do say, you've just got to pick a team, work that out. It might take you a while, like yourself, to work out what that team is. However, when you do, we can connect you to people within those teams. So you've just got to pick a team. That's just the way our system works, ultimately.
Yeah.
Thanks to our guests, and thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast, hit subscribe now. Alternatively, you can support our mission by checking out in the show notes below, where you can rate, donate, or become our mate. Thank you.